In today's video, I'm going to be comparing the difference between New Zealand and Japan. A few weeks ago, I was lucky enough to go to Japan for 1 week. I've never been to a foreign country in the sense of it being completely different to what I'm used to in terms of a Western lifestyle and way of living. The only other country I've been to outside of New Zealand is Australia, as I lived in Australia for quite a few years growing up. So going to Japan is my first real foreign place, so to speak, where everything is completely different. When you think about it, New Zealand is quite similar to Australia, so it's quite easy to integrate and assimilate into their culture when you go over there. All you need to have to move to Australia from New Zealand is a New Zealand passport and a plane ticket. You can just turn up and establish your life there. Now, where I live in New Zealand is the biggest city, with around 33% of the population, I believe, 1.6 million out of 5 million, Auckland. So I am a Jaffa. Where I went to in Japan was Tokyo, which is magnitudes larger. Auckland, in the grand scheme of things, and even New Zealand, is quite a minuscule place. What matters here is irrelevant. For some context, New Zealand only has a total population of around 5 million. Sydney has more than that, but Tokyo has around 35 million, which is larger than Australia, New Zealand combined, and then some. The person in the car next to me just drove away, and I feel kind of gay for recording. The difference in population allows for a completely different way of organising society, and it's definitely reflected in the lifestyle and way the cities are organised. Auckland is more of a, what I would call a lifestyle city. You've got all kinds of choices within, let's say, 2 hours. You've got the beaches, you've got mountains. Well, it's a little bit further away than 2 hours, and it's kind of like just a small town kind of vibe. Even though you've got the CBD with its skyscrapers, the suburbs are low-lying. People think just because it's a city it must be jam-packed full of traffic all the time, but Auckland isn't really like that. It is like that during peak hours, don't get me wrong, but that's along highways. It's not going to be down your personal street, where people enjoy yards and you can go for a quiet walk, and even kids might play down the street. On the street, it's that quiet. But what you see in Tokyo is a much more dense way of living. There's not much in the way of yards and parks. It's a lot harder to get around Tokyo. Even though the distances are measurably the same, the perception and the time it actually takes feels longer than it does in New Zealand. I feel like getting around Tokyo, 1 kilometre feels like a lot longer than 1 kilometre in Auckland. But I was walking and biking around a lot, admittedly, whereas I'd be usually driving around in Auckland, but it still felt a lot longer than even walking around Auckland. But that's because they've managed, what we would fit into a kilometre block in New Zealand, they managed to cram a whole lot more, and they've got lots of different alleyways and streets and little lights you have to wait at. Even though nobody's driving past, people still wait at them anyway. So, completely different. Where New Zealand has that detached house, yard, place to park your car, there is a lot more apartment and dense living in Tokyo, and that does lead to a completely different lifestyle and way of living, where you need a car to get around Auckland. Even though we're a city, the public transport is not that great. In Japan, you can live in the pod, take your public transport and eat at a konbini, and you don't need much space. That being said, I am making fun of it, the public transport side of things and the living in the pod, so to speak, but public transport there, it matches stereotypes. It's completely true that it is superior in all ways. That being said, I did find myself just having to digest where I am, and I'm usually quite good with directions and having a sense of self-direction and where to go, but in Japan, foreign language barrier and not knowing where I'm actually going, you have to pause and just be like, where am I at the moment? But once you get your bearings, it does take time. You can work it out. Having walked around Tokyo and biked around it, I didn't take any cars. The only other way I got around was with trains. But even that, I tried to keep that to a minimum. I wanted to just see the street scenes and see what it's like. That's why I didn't take the high-speed rails out. I didn't want to spend all my time travelling around and not actually getting a chance to enjoy Japan itself. When I was in Japan, I was curious about what their minimum wage was. In New Zealand, it's around $23 New Zealand dollars. I converted the Tokyo minimum wage, so it must go off where you live, the cities or states or whatever they call them, whereas in New Zealand it's a national minimum wage. $23 in New Zealand, $11 in Tokyo. Now, they would make up for this by working more, as they're a stereotype to do, but half the minimum wage, and food I estimate maybe a third cheaper, but some of that is actually just because of the weak yen at the moment. So for them, it might be quite expensive, and when the yen eventually rebounds, it'll probably be more on par and not as drastic in the sense of it being a third cheaper. But also a lot of that is based on their portion sizes being smaller. The only places I went to were the Convenies and a Life supermarket, I think it's called. Something like that. It was underground, which was quite cool. So you're talking about a third cheaper, but smaller portion sizes to go with it. And I was thinking about this while I was there as well, having a look at the meat and the vegetables. Not to toot New Zealand's horn, but there is a case to be made that New Zealand food is actually superior in terms of quality and, for example, the meat you get in the supermarket in New Zealand is by default grass-fed meat, whereas overseas it would be grain-fed, mass-produced, in barns or wherever they keep their cows and fed all kinds of crap. But once you account for quality, which you can't easily compare, then there is a case to be made that if you're paying the same per kg, but New Zealand has the superior quality, you're actually getting the better deal in New Zealand. And then when you think about it by how many hours you need to work to afford the same food, keeping in mind that their minimum wage after conversions at the moment is less than half an hour's. So New Zealand actually has the better deal, even though New Zealanders like to complain that it's the most expensive place in the world. It's not cheap, but I genuinely don't think it is that terrible, the cost of living. Now, I live in Auckland. A lot of the issues with Auckland prices comes down to housing. Everything else is comparable to the rest of the country, like fuel, electricity, food. The main variable, key difference, is to do with rental housing and the price of housing especially to buy. Now, on the topic of food, I actually didn't really try too much in the way of Japanese cuisine. I did try some sushi, as you would expect, but a lot of what I ate was from the convenies. It was ready to eat TV meals that you can heat up at the convenience, as they've got microwaves there, and the little packets have recommended time, so you just press the button. I do like that part, but just because something is foreign and exotic and oriental doesn't mean that it's necessarily good. And I'm not saying that Japanese food is bad. In some regards it is healthier, but in the terms of taste, it just comes down to personal preference. And let me tell you, I kind of prefer New Zealand food. There's some food in Japan where I thought, oh, this might be quite nice, but then you bite into it and it tastes bland. It tastes like a grey matter. Like, I bought some donuts from a convenience for 50 cents, around 60 yen, let's say, and They were disgusting. I thought they were cinnamon donuts because they had that yellow orange texture with sugar on them. I thought, oh, this would be just a cinnamon donut. Little mini cinnamon donuts. It was revolting. I couldn't even get through it all. I just had to stop halfway. I thought I tried to avoid the sunk cost fallacy. I just had to. I couldn't get through it. Even though it was little mini donuts about that large, they were disgusting. They were milk and honey donuts, I later found out on a Google search. Tastes disgusting. And then to supplement the disgusting donuts I had was this iced tea garbage where it was a multitude of flavours. I'll put a picture up on the screen. It was horrible. And I think a lot of that is actually due to how Japanese food would be processed. In New Zealand, I just assume they just dump bag loads and bag loads of sugar into food, and I'm acclimatised to that junk food taste. Whereas in Japan, they're more advanced and healthier, and they don't have as much sugar, and that makes them better in all ways imaginable. I like sugar. Now, the konbini food I had was quite good, actually. To be fair, the ready-to-eat TV meals were actually pretty good, the microwave meals that are... and I don't typically like microwave food. I think it's trash. It is in New Zealand, at least. I'd rather take the 30 minutes, have it cooked in an oven, and just done properly, with it tasting nice, and not all soggy like a pie, for example. Never microwave a pie. So when I was in Japan, I actually did eat McDonald's, which maybe it's 20% cheaper than New Zealand. So something like a Big Mac combo might cost $12 in New Zealand. After conversions, $10. New Zealand dollars, this is all in. Now, when I was in Japan, I also had KFC. Now, the thing I quite like about the KFC, it tastes pretty similar to New Zealand, virtually identical. The only difference between KFC and McDonald's between Japan and New Zealand are the potatoes. The potato just tastes slightly off. It's not terrible, it's just a marginal 5% difference in quality for the worse. It's a different type of potatoes, whatever. The thing I liked about KFC is that normally when you get something in New Zealand, you get your drinks, and they just put it in this cardboard thing, and then you've got to try and put it in a cup holder where you hold it. In Japan, they put the drink into a bag, and they have the food in a separate bag, but then they wrap it in a plastic bag so you can just hold it with one hand. Logical. That's what Japan is known for, is thinking and being advanced and convenience. If they didn't ban plastic bags in New Zealand, they should have done that. Now, another thing, when I was walking around Tokyo, I maybe saw 5 homeless in total, and mostly situated around Tokyo Station, as there's this raised train bridge that cuts through Tokyo, and a lot of them sleep between the piers or underneath where the traffic cuts through. 5 homeless. I could walk down central part of Auckland, Queen Street, and see 5 homeless on the same block. Now, I don't know the means to which Japan treats their homeless, whether it's with dignity or whether they treat them terribly, I don't know. But it is impressive that a city much, much larger can have that little homeless. And it makes for a good perception. Nobody wants to be harassed by window washing dickheads and people who ask for change for tools or whatever they are. Like, nobody wants that. Now, the sounds between New Zealand and Japan are completely different. Like, in the airport, I was in the airport for a few hours at Narita, and just because there was an elevator, no, there was an escalator there. The escalator is going up to the 2nd floor. The escalator is going up to the 2nd floor. The escalator is going up to the 2nd floor. Every 3 seconds, It didn't stop. It's just an escalator. Have some common sense. People know that there's an escalator there. They're not going to fall down and go backwards without the music. So the music's completely different between Japan and New Zealand. In the stores, you get little string renditions of like Jump Van Halen that are like do 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 do, like it's peaceful, but it does start to get to you after a while. And another thing is that when you walk down the streets, or especially around Akihabara, it's especially true about the stereotypes about Japan's degeneracy. My God. You walk around there and there's these cat girl short skirt, schoolgirl uniform wearing things giving out pamphlets. I don't want that in my society. Also, another thing, the language barrier is a real thing. I thought, being Tokyo, it's an international city, surely you'd be able to get by with a little bit of English. And don't rely on that being true. I know no Japanese, aside from konnichiwa and arigato, and that was all I could do. It's virtually, if you go there by yourself, you're not going to communicate with anyone effectively, which was my experience. I basically spoke to nobody for a week there in person. Something that bothers me about Japan, on a serious note, is the cash thing that they have. FPOS and card systems and PayWave, even Apple Pay, it doesn't have prominence in the same way that it does in New Zealand. Cash is completely trash in New Zealand. You don't need it to get around. You can live your life on card, which is just convenient and easier. Now, people who despise cashless societies, they're morons, essentially. Having cash is a pain, and that is especially so in Japan. When I had to withdraw $100 from an ATM with a 1% fee, before currency conversions are taken out of Wise, just to buy a train ticket, I had to withdraw $100 to buy a $10 train ticket. You can't pay with card. Even they've got machines there, cash only. You go to the assistants, the in-person assistants, which are there, cash only. Sorry, you have to go to an ATM to get some cash out. It's such an inconvenience. So the result of this is that I've got some souvenirs from Japan, being their currency. They've got a 500 yen coin, that's $5, in coin form. We've got a $5 note in New Zealand. They've got a $5 coin. And their denominations are a bit peculiar. They seem to be in a pattern of 1515, 1515. Getting back to a point I had before, Japan actually isn't always intuitive. The point about having to just digest your surroundings and get a sense of your bearings is a true thing. I suppose it's different once you live there and you know how things work. But if you're not familiar with buying train tickets and having to use public transport and just getting around, it's not always intuitive. But it's also not hard to learn. Once you learn it, it is pretty easy. But it does pay to do some research before you go. But all in all, I did enjoy Japan in the week I was there. I saw the main sights of Tokyo. I didn't go outside of Tokyo, but I'm happy with what I did in a week. And I didn't even do too much there. I just mainly stuck to around the central parts. I went to the Skytree, went to Akihabara. I went to that busy crossing with loads and loads of people. You know, that crossing that goes that way, and that makes it a very special crossing for some reason. Shibuya, I think it's called Shibuya. And I went to the Skytree. I actually didn't do too much, but I still enjoyed my time while I was there. I like seeing the konbinis and walking around and seeing how people live, and it's actually It's pretty nice. I enjoy that. I've got a small town mindset, and the way we entertain ourselves in a small town is just going for a drive, going for a walk. So I'm completely satisfied. I didn't have to go do expensive things and go to Disneyland or whatever it's called, Disney World, and spend truckloads of money. You don't have to do that. I found it completely enjoyable, and it's what you make it. If you want to make it expensive, the option's there. But if you want to be budget, it's pretty cheap. I only paid 1,300 New Zealand for economy flights return. Pretty good. Around 350 for an Airbnb, and then when I was in Japan, I had about spending money of around 300. And so my discretionary outside of flights and hotel, 300 for a week. Pretty good. That covered my food, Skytree, the Red Tower, the Tokyo Tower, trains, and gifts. I didn't buy any souvenirs for myself, I just bought some for my girlfriend and mother. But otherwise, it's what you make it. If you want it to be expensive, it will be. But if you want it to be a cheap trip as well, it absolutely is, especially with the way the currency is. I believe $1, 150 yen. In New Zealand, our currency is weaker, so 1 yen, 100 New Zealand at the moment. So it is a good time to travel. If you get the flights, do go. It is an amazing place, and I'm absolutely grateful that I did have the chance to go and make it happen. Before I went on my trip to Japan, I had about a month's notice. 1 month, before I booked the flights and went. Oh, what a month. My life is not, it just can't be simple and straightforward and in a linear direction. No. I booked my flights, Airbnb, spend 1,600. What happens to my car? Gets broken into. And then the day after, tyre pops. What is this life that I live? But so that did put a damper on mood. Instead of being happy, it's like, I'm happy about going to Japan and having this trip. But then it's like, oh, what am I coming back to? I've got to fix this car now. And it's still not even fixed. Look at it. It's junk. But thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please like, comment and subscribe.